Single-payer healthcare is a model that you can see expressed in virtually every other industrialized state in the world where they guarantee healthcare as a human right. This isn't an argument about Soviet Russia versus the United States. This is an argument where in the most successful economy in the world, where we have the richest people in the world, where our GDP is high and our unemployment is low, can we, like the rest of the world has, declare that healthcare is a human right?
Often you are hearing misleading characterizations of the support among programs such as Medicare for All and other single-payer options. Most of this comes from the health insurance companies and the Republican Party, but there's polling data, recent polling data, would suggest that a majority of Americans, including Republicans, are in favor of the idea, partly due to the fact that according to one poll, 71% of respondents said that the system that we have in place is in, quote, a state of crisis. While at the same time that this is happening, the average American and their family are responsible for paying for their own health care through private plans under a for-profit model. They have to pay for premiums, which bind them to their employer. And even after paying for their premiums, which only give them access to their health care, they then are responsible for co-pays, co-insurance, and various other expenses, including deductibles, which means that you have to spend money out of pocket before you're ever even able to take advantage of the health care that you pay for, which is not a surprise when you realize how cumbersome and expensive the system that we have in place is. It's not a surprise when you realize that we're paying for insolvent programs that even the right would characterize as welfare programs, in that you have a majority of the population that's contributing to programs that they themselves aren't taking advantage of. Now, this is something that we've grown accustomed to in the United States, but it's certainly not something that the rest of the developed world is subject to.
I'll share a link of a video in the description below highlighting exactly how people in other countries, like Great Britain, simply don't know about how much Americans pay for healthcare. The administrative overhead for the American health insurance companies is more than a quarter of every dollar spent in the United States on healthcare. This compared to just a few percentage points in single-payer models. Why is this? Because they have to compete with each other. They have to attend to the needs of their investors. And more importantly than anything, capitalism does not produce the best outcome for healthcare. Healthcare works by risk pools. Therefore, you are reducing costs by stretching them out across the greatest number of people.
Now, this is just one example, but it bears true over the course of all the data that I've looked at, which is that the American private healthcare model's administrative overhead expenses are several times that of their single-payer counterparts, including Medicare and TRICARE here in the United States.
By having sick people and healthy people in the same pool. And the more healthy people you have to support the sick people, the lower the costs are. This not only affects procedures and surgeries, but this affects surgical devices. This affects the single payer health insurance organization's ability to leverage that economic strength to reduce prices. And this is why you see lower prices and better outcomes in every other country in the world. And it's worth mentioning that every other industrialized state in the world that has single payer healthcare, which all of them do, guarantee healthcare as a human right. And this is what we know. We know that healthcare works by risk pools, wherein costs are shared by everyone in the population. We know that they work best when healthy people have to share costs and are in the same program as the sick people. That's not what we have in the United States. In the United States, we have a system where the sickest people are concentrated into one pool. Poor people are concentrated into another pool. And it's the responsibility of the rest of society to support the sick and the poor people in a cumbersome and expensive healthcare model.
So as we can see, healthcare costs about twice as much as almost every other developed country in the world. Another article here suggests that it is 25% more expensive than the second placed country, and then over 100% more expensive, which means it's twice as expensive as Canadian healthcare. As the headline for the article suggests, we're spending more, but we're not getting the quality. And I thought that we could explore that as well. With that said, why is single payer healthcare better?
It's cheaper, both for the consumer and for the government. It's better in that it produces better outcomes for the people who utilize it. And ultimately, it doesn't create insolvent systems like we have in the United States. When we look at Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security, we're pulling our hair out, thinking of strategies to fix it or throw it away altogether. Meanwhile, the rest of Americans are paying through the nose for that system and their own health care. They're paying for premiums. They're paying deductibles just to utilize their health care. And none of these things affect people in single-payer healthcare systems. They're simply not subject to them. Critics of single-payer healthcare often cite the cost. They say, oh, that's good, that's great, I love it. But how are you going to pay for it? Well, again, the costs are less, both for the government and for the consumer. Could taxes potentially go up? Absolutely, but you're already paying taxes on exactly this. Most of the people that are advocating some form of single-payer healthcare model are talking about taking existing structures like Medicare and expanding it to include more and more people. Now, right now, you are paying 7.5% for Social Security tax and additional costs for Medicare. You are already paying for these programs.
For those of you that don't know, Medicare was an expansion of the Social Security system, and as a part of the payroll tax, we pay approximately 7.5%, 6.2% coming from and for Social Security, and 1.45% being allocated to Medicare, which is matched by employers. What many of you don't know is that there is a cap on the Social Security tax called the wage base, meaning that any earnings over $132,900 do not get taxed, meaning the Warren Buffetts of the world are only getting taxed at 7.5% on the first $132,900 of income. So clearly, if there's ever any consideration about a solvency issue, look no further than the wage base.
So what am I really saying here? The 7.5% to 10% of your income that's subject to the Social Security tax could go up marginally, but it would eliminate your premium. It would eliminate deductibles. It would eliminate copays, which means that at the end of the day, not only are you paying far less for health insurance, you're actually getting more money on your paycheck. I think real average American workers and their families are not concerned about the pay stub. I think they're more concerned with the paycheck. And under a single payer healthcare model, the paycheck would be bigger. But it's not only about how much money do you have at the end of the month. It's not only about not having to pay premiums and co-pays and co-insurance and having better healthcare outcomes. It also affects the existing structure that we have in place. Many Americans have advocated for preserving the system that we have in place where employers are involved in the process of insuring Americans. But this is flawed reasoning. American companies have to pay more for benefits to retain employees. And employees that work at those companies are often stuck at those companies because they need the health insurance that's offered through the company. What single payer does is it frees those companies of the obligation that they provide some sort of health care to their employees and puts that onto the back of the government. This not only gives more freedom for the companies to be able to make decisions that they need to make, and the employees to be able to move from company to company without facing the consequences of having to go on a costly program like COBRA. But it also gives people the ability to start businesses. This could be a boon for entrepreneurs, people looking to start businesses, people that are only bound by their companies because of a desire to provide health insurance for themselves and their family. Something they just wouldn't have to do under a single payer healthcare system. So to summarize, single payer healthcare is better. If you're interested in learning more about single payer healthcare, make sure you check the sources below, like this video and subscribe. Also, leave a comment for suggestions about future videos. Thank you. Have a nice day.